It's been years since the YouTube algorithm decided one of my videos was worth recommending. Despite all of my hard work, YouTube has been making every effort to put my channel in the dirt. With all that in mind, I said, if this video hits 100,000 views by April, I will do an entire video in a French-made costume. I say this because I have exactly 0% confidence in YouTube's algorithm. This was, at once, an act of desperation and a cry for help. Look at that curve. It's basically tapered off. It's not gonna happen without manual intervention. The YouTube algorithm dropped me a long time ago. Higher click-through rate from regular channel views. The #1 video on my channel by a massive margin. Views are 70 times higher than usual. Longer average view duration from regular channel More views from YouTube recommendations. 96.2 thousand more views than usual. This wasn't supposed to happen. So I lost a bet. So you'll notice that I was using mostly practical effects in this film, which is a departure from my usual style. The reason for this is that it actually saves a lot of time in post. It's pretty tedious to go through and add sparks and smoke and muzzle flash effects to every single gunshot. So I figured that I would rather do some extra complex animation than the tedious process of editing muzzle flashes in post. It's also just stylistically better. When you see digital effects in like The Last Colony, it doesn't really match, it clashes. You have these photorealistic sparks and explosions mixed with just Lego studs everywhere. So if the explosions have Lego studs as well, then it just feels more believable, even though they look less realistic. And truth be told, I think it looks fantastic, so I'm glad I went this way. In addition to the orange terrain plates, I also used the flame effects from the Pokemon Ponyta set. Ponyta has become bald. It looks very funny now. By the way, my Patreon supporters have been able to see all the raw footage from this film. Like every time I did a few new shots, I would upload that to Patreon and they could see it like a couple months early. These little party lights here, they're pretty cheap and pretty bright too. So if you're working on an explosion effect, you can fit one in the core of all these translucent pieces and they'll light the whole place up orange. I think it worked out pretty well. I'm still working on the exact timing and spacing of the explosion, but I think that looks good. I like the lighting a lot. I'm still trying to figure out how to do blood splatters practically, but they look fine digital, so I'll keep doing it that way for now. Now, the first big practical effect of the film is when the prototype teleports into the scene behind Master Chief. What I like about doing these explosion effects practically is that I can sculpt them frame by frame, like every single frame is a completely different assemblage of parts. And that way I have complete control over every part of the explosion. So for these explosions, I use a variety of different parts. I try to stick with mega constructs for obvious reasons, but if I run out of the right color part, then I can switch to Lego. In this explosion, you'll see stacks of Lego studs, you'll see Forerunner Mega Constructs crates, you'll see Mega Constructs terrain base plates, and there's always a light hidden behind each plate which illuminates them. So this is the Banished Prototype. In my personal headcanon, this is a Letgolo colony that lost its bond brother and is now in a permanent rage state. The Banished were able to subdue it, and they outfitted it with some Promethean technology recovered on Zeta Halo, giving it extra weapons and abilities. The base figure is an Elder Hunter from the UNSC Wasp set. I used a head from a Destiny War Beast. The War Beast came with the Destiny Avalon Courser Sparrow. It has a hard light shield. These two pieces of armor came from one of the Breakout Beasts. It was some kind of griffin. I don't know what those things are called. There are 2 pulse grenades on the back. Then the cannon is made up of several parts. We have a Halo Reach jetpack, 2 silver assault rifles, a light rifle from Halo 4, and a chain from a Warthog turret. I really like using these hunter figures specifically because they have ball joints on their ankles and a ball joint in the waist. Those ankles let you get some much smoother walk cycles than you can normally achieve, and I know that you guys noticed that Master Chief's walk cycles were not great. This waist also really helps with some of the swinging actions. The one thing I wish could be improved is the head articulation. It can't look up or down. It can only tilt side to side, and not very smoothly. But that's fine. This is what's left of the Master Chief mech. It's not the Halo Legends prototype. It has different armor plating, I extended the legs slightly, I gave it a different cannon, and instead of the fist that came with the original set, I gave it these articulated fingers that I took off a Cyclops. For the prototype's laser beam, I used a lot of different effect parts. Primarily, I was using Mega Constructs Forerunner crates, transparent orange terrain pieces, and this thing. This tube originally was packaging for this green epoxy putty. I scuffed it with a sanding sponge to kind of diffuse the light, and then I went over it with an orange and a yellow Sharpie, just over and over, and then I filled it up with these fairy lights. They're battery powered, so they do kind of run down after a while, but they look pretty good. And then whenever I had it on camera, I would sort of wiggle it back and forth to blur it, and that way you can see the wires and the individual bulbs inside. You can still see them in some frames, but like, it's fine, it's not too distracting. Now let me talk about the soundtrack. As a placeholder, I used the Menagerie from Halo 3 ODST. And during the big sword fight at the end, I switched it to the guitar solo version, which is Skyline from the same game. But Halo music is kind of copyrighted and it made me nervous, so I decided I would have to use something else. So then I dropped in The Only Thing I Know For Real from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, purely as a joke, intending to upload a separate version, and it fit perfectly. All the big hits matched with the lyrics of the song and the progression of the chorus and the verses and the guitar solo. The bass hits right as the mech's foot comes down. And then the final note hits right when Chief kills the prototype. It was just perfect. It was too perfect. I figured it was God telling me I had to use the Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance soundtrack in my YouTube video, so I did. And also, I really like Metal Gear Rising. I want to be Raiden. I kin, I stan, I yearn. Also, I find it kind of amusing that Metal Gear Rising looks like this. And it led to this. Parents, if you're worried about Metal Gear Rising feminizing your children, you are right to be worried. I was worried that this music would get a copyright strike as well, but I uploaded a test version and no copyrighted audio was detected. Thank you, Hashem. So I tried to animate the mech to look slow and heavy and powerful, kind of clumsy, like every step would make the ground shake and it would make the arms kind of move and bounce. But the problem is that isn't really conducive to like really fast, powerful punches, so I compensated by making it look clumsy wherever possible. There would be a few rare instances of a really fast movement, like locking its cannon into position. I did use the Samus pose, or just a handful of very powerful punches. I'm really glad that both of these figures had ankle joints and made it much easier to swing them around on their feet when they're fighting. The one issue though is that the mech figure doesn't have a waist joint, which made the big arm swings kind of difficult. I had to rotate his entire body using his legs instead of just twisting the waist as I normally would. Also, Mega Constructs, if you're watching, first of all, I hope this doesn't sour your opinion of me, and second of all, please start adding ankle ball joints to all of your Spartan figures. It would be a huge help. I love you guys. So, to compensate for the lack of a waist joint, sometimes I would make him step into his punches, sometimes I would go up and down instead of side to side. Now this explosion with the plasma coil, this was a lot of fun to animate. Again, I sculpted pretty much every frame individually. Every frame is unique. I put a lot of time into this explosion because I wanted it to look perfect. You'll notice there's kind of a circular shockwave going on. I didn't actually have enough blue Mega Constructs parts for this, so I used Lego here and there. Mega Constructs, if you're watching this, I still prefer you. I love you more. Now the thing about explosions is that they start very quickly and they end relatively slowly. There will be like a very small bright flash for like one frame, then it'll expand instantly, and then it sort of tapers out over the next few frames. So you have one frame like this, then a bunch of frames like this. And combined with the lens flare and the camera shake, you can get a really convincing explosion. There are very few shots in this film where you can actually see the full length of the prototype's laser beam. I don't have that many parts that I can use for beams, and I couldn't reliably hold them up with a rig. The reason for that is that there was a lighting effect going on, and you would see shadows from the rig underneath the beam, and I would have to erase part of the background, and the lighting might not be the same. And I didn't want to do all that, so I just kind of faked it. In a few shots, I used some perspective tricks. Like in this one in particular, there's only two parts of the beam here. There's the muzzle flash on the prototype's cannon, and then there's the impact on the mech's shield. These two parts are not connected. They look that way because of the perspective, but there's actually like 6 inches of empty space between them. Okay, now this shot, the Canon Slice. This was the first big damage effect of the film. I was extremely nervous leading into this, and I just had to cross my fingers that it would look good, because if I make a mistake, I can't go back. The thing's already cut in half. And as it turns out, I did make a mistake. The shot looked very bad. I didn't like it. It was bad. I did a bad job. I panicked. I thought I would have to go and get another prototype mech set. The main issue is you don't really see anything being cut. There's just a flash of light, and then suddenly he has a cannon stump. But thanks to my very large brain, I was able to come up with a solution. So I just deleted the second half of that shot. I cut right as the shield appears and slices the cannon, and then I reanimated everything that happens after that. So in the second version of the shot, I made the severed half of the cannon fly into the air and spin, had the camera hold on that for a few frames, just linger a little bit so you could see what happened, and it turned out much better. That little pause in the action just gave it that much more impact. Then for this chest blast right after, I held on that impact for a couple frames, just darkened everything except for the blast effect, shook the camera a little bit, added some lightning, linger on that just a little. It's kind of anime style, but I'm wearing a maid costume. Do you think I care at this point? Then when the Banshee explodes, I used a black light in tandem with some tissue paper to give it kind of a glare. And then comes the sword fight. The friggin' sword fight. The best part of the entire film. Some of the coolest animation I've ever done, if I'm being honest. It starts right with a guitar solo from the Metal Gear Rising soundtrack. And as a matter of fact, this sword fight is the whole reason I added that soundtrack in the first place. Now look at this shot right here when the prototype is slicing up the mech repeatedly. On this one slash in particular, I just want to hold and show you how I animated this. It's just a good technique for you to use in your own films. So he has this starting pose, the blade is angled down towards the ground, but then as he lifts it, he takes a step forward, and I hold on this pose for just a little bit, and that's called the anticipation pose. And then the actual slice, that only takes one frame. Like you get one messy frame and that's it, and then he's in the follow-through pose. So two main poses, anticipation and follow-through, and like one frame of the action itself. And believe it or not, that makes the action feel a lot more impactful when you barely animate any of it. So he starts and he ends on two very clean, readable poses. You get a slight arc as he's coming into his second pose. So you can see the direction the blade was moving, but it happens so fast that you don't actually see the blade moving until after it's finished its movement. If you can follow that kind of timing, it'll make all of your impacts feel that much more powerful. So then he gets his arm sliced off. I zoomed in on this shot as close as I could. I held on it for just a little longer than absolutely necessary. I can only animate his arm getting sliced off once. I needed to make sure viewers see exactly what happens. I needed it to go by fast enough that it doesn't feel like it's in slow motion. And the angle of the cut needed to match the angle of the swing, so I had to keep checking back and forth when I was slicing it in half with my Dremel. For every single frame of this shot, I need to move the Chief's mech out of frame. I need to move his severed leg out of frame. I need to take a clean plate to make sure I have a clean background to erase the rig. Then I need to move him back into position in three-dimensional space. Move the camera ever so slightly downward, and once all that's done, I need to move him back into his original position as close to start as possible. Make sure he's still rotating the same way he was last frame. Keep up all the secondary action on his flailing limbs. I need to keep his severed legs spinning midair with the right acceleration and trajectory. There are many, many moving parts. Difficult to keep track of all of them, and there's a lot that can go wrong with each one. Now the mistake I've made here is that the rig on his severed leg is crossing over the midair Master Chief mech. That's quite bad. I might need to do 3 passes. I could really use a better system of lights here. These are battery powered and they're suspended with goo. Okay. Beauty shot. Both beauty and clean shot. And the clean shot. That took me about 7 minutes. Now I get to do it all over again for 1/15 of a second of footage. Now, I had to do a lot of editing in post to make this shield impact feel right. I kind of went off script. Originally, the plan was, as the mech is falling, the prototype would hit it with its shield midair and slam it into the rocks. But when I animated it that way, it looked really bad, so I took the existing footage I had, and then I added just one shot in the middle of the mech hitting the ground and bouncing, and then I animated the camera sweeping to the side, and that way I could cut into the existing footage of the prototype swinging its shield. You can actually see a cut here if you go through frame by frame. The position of the prototype doesn't really match up between frames. For this bit here where the mech's leg hits the ground, the timing is way off. Like, if you watch this clip back, you'll see that that thing has been spinning in the air for like several seconds longer than it should be possible. I don't know if people noticed that or not, but I figured I would break the rules a little bit because it looks cool. So whenever I animate one of these little impacts here, something heavy hits the ground, the camera shakes a little bit, I get that motion blur effect by doing this. So then this chest slice, this final slice, this took a few tries. I animated the sword coming down several times, but I stopped right before it actually sliced into the chest. So I tried a few different versions of this until I edited a couple together and matched on one that felt right. Now there's this one very long shot at the end here, it's about 10 seconds long, as he jumps out of the suit, he latches onto the prototype's back, swings around, gets thrown off, dodges the blade, and then shoots it. So that was about 150 frames, and it took me something like 6 hours to animate. And then finally, he kills the prototype. This is like one of the coolest things I've ever done. I did have to destroy a hunter figure for this, and yes, it hurt. So badly. It pains me to do this. I am in actual agony, and that's only partially because of the molten plastic spewing onto my fingers. Those things are really hard to find nowadays, but in my opinion it was worth it. It looks gruesome, it looks freaking cool. I think it turned out great. And specifically, what I really like is the torn up flesh on the severed half of the hunter. I've been using a Dremel, like a rotary tool, to cut these things, and it spins so quickly that it heats up the plastic and melts it a little bit, so it looks like ragged, torn flesh. It's a byproduct of, physics, but I think it's a great effect. Now, one thing I've really been struggling with on this film is getting the laser beam effects to look right. Those things are made of light, so if they don't illuminate the entire set accordingly, it's not going to be convincing. And so, for the final, most powerful beam attack in the entire film, I decided that, I could spare no expense with this. I had to make it look as good as possible. So eventually I realized there is one product which fulfills all of my needs very well. Anyway, I've got this articulating arm with a clamp on the end of it. I've got this C-stand. The clamp will hold the lightsaber. The C-stand will hold the clamp midair. And hopefully I can get this positioned just right. Okay, I think this will work. I just really wanted one of these. So yeah, that final laser beam, that's almost completely practical. I did add some rippling energy effects and some lightning, and I altered the colors slightly, but overall, it's just this. Even without effects, it looks fantastic. Then comes the final headshot at the end. It actually took me a while to come up with a decent ending. There were a few different possibilities I played with. I talked about this in my Discord, by the way, link in the description. I'm using acrylic paint here to simulate the prototype's blood. This will probably go deeply wrong. One more big glob in the eye socket. And I gotta be real careful not to actually touch the paint, lest I get it smeared all over the set and the camera. One day it just hit me. Just shoot him in the head. Just kill him again. Kill him twice. And I think it worked out great. I really liked that moment. I think it's kind of funny, but also kind of extremely cool. And then Chief's final walk cycle. You guys all noticed. It's not good. I did not do a good job. So actually, right after I finished this film, I went and practiced a bunch of different walk cycles, and I think I've gotten the hang of it now, but still, I'm gonna avoid animating any walk cycles as much as I possibly can. Alright, I guess that's all I got to talk about. Thank you all so much for watching this. I'm so glad the algorithm finally noticed my work. But also, I have to wear this now. I have this in my wardrobe now. I can take it out whenever I want. I feel like you guys wanted me to enjoy this, be like, oh, I actually feel really, really cute. It's just clothing. It feels weird on my head, but mostly I just feel like I'm a guy wearing clothes, and I usually feel like a guy wearing clothes. And sure, I feel cute, but I always feel cute, I'm just a cute guy. Anyway, thank you so much to all of my Patreon supporters. It's thanks to you that I could afford this French-made costume. I really appreciate you guys supporting me financially. It helps me live. Thank you all for subscribing. Thank you for liking my videos and helping the algorithm notice me. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I'm never wearing this again, so you don't have that to look forward to. Also, my next project will be a music video for the band I Fight Dragons. Bye, love you.